The stakes are getting higher as the point total for the Kentucky Derby prep races steps up to 50 points for the winner. Let's dive into the Risen Star for the first time. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Trust the Profits YouTube page. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm joined by Matt DeSantis today. The Risen Star Stakes field is already out a week in advance. Man, do I love that. The points total go up and the field is interesting. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, you can tell it's a big time field with the points going up. We have a lot of, I think, very strong Derby contenders in this field, a full field of 14 horses, and 5 of them featured on our own Trust the Profits consensus top 25 list. So, a lot of really live runners in this race. Excited to get into it.
Yeah, and before we do, let's just take a quick look because I always like to look back and look at your Risen Star winners. This is where you start getting into the meat of the prep races. I mean, we've had some great, 3 races last weekend, or today, I should say, as we tape this Saturday night. But you got Epicenter, Mandolin, Gunrunner. This is a race where you're starting to see contenders for the Derby.
Absolutely. No, last year, obviously, the 3-year-old horse of the year coming out of this race, Mandaloun, the Kentucky Derby winner, coming out of this race 2 years ago. So this is absolutely a type of a race where you start seeing big time horses come out of it. And this is a big time circuit down at the fairgrounds.
And it's the only race next weekend, too. So, we've kind of been splitting our attention of where we go and who we're looking at. It's all eyes on one race, and let's dive right into it. You have a full field of 14, and as you said, we have 5 out of our top 25 list. I mean, the first thing I'm saying is this is when we're really starting to see the matchups of, the horses kind of go off on their own. They beat against horses, that aren't going to be on the trail. Maybe you get, 1 or 2 that are facing off against each other, such as Determinedly and Tappett's Conquest, including Silver Heist last out. But now you're getting them all in one race, and this is where it gets fun.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of horses coming back from a layoff, such as Curly Jack coming back from a really long layoff. This is a horse who I feel like his form has gotten flattered the longer he's been out because of his, hooking up with Instant Coffee before, who's gone on to win several races, including the Lecomte, 2 Fills, Victory Formation, Tappett's Conquest, Determinedly, Harlow Cap, who just got transferred from Bob Baffert's barn to Steve Asmussen's barn. So there's a lot of really interesting dynamics in this race. Not to mention you have Victory Formation, who's a kind of a need to lead horse all the way out in that 13 post. So again, post position playing a big factor here, and just what type of trip these horses are going to get. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, you have 5 horses making their 4th start. So that's an interesting thing that I looked at, and that includes Victory Formation, Tappett's Conquest, Sun Thunder as well. And what I like to do is go back and let's see what they've done against each other. And I think 2 races that you certainly want to pay attention to. One would be probably the Smarty Jones, where you did have Victory Formation and Angel of Empire come out of that race. The other one was on the undercard of the Lecomte Stakes. It was race 9. And I think that's a key race in determining where you're going to go with this field, because that was the race, you remember, where Determinedly, as we talked in the prep, got out to a nice, easy lead going 25-48 and was able to hold off a horse that I love, the 8 here, Tappett's Conquest. And you had Silver Heist in there, who also sat just behind the pace that day. So those are 3 that you're probably going to go back and watch that race and decide maybe, like you said, Determinedly, I got a nice, easy trip. I don't think Determinedly wants this extra ground. And for me, this is a full fade on Determinedly from my standpoint. How about you?
Yeah, I would probably say the same thing. I mean, I like Determinedly in that last race. He kind of got gifted the lead. He's not a horse that naturally likes sitting on the lead. He likes to kind of stalk. I think that actually sets up nicely in this race because he doesn't have the early speed of Harlow Cap. He doesn't have the early speed of Victory Formation. I would imagine that he'll sit behind that. That said, I agree with you that he probably is a little distance limited when you start stretching him out. And so I think Tappett's Conquest, second back from a layoff, important to point out, that was first time off the bench for Tappett's Conquest last time. Now, second time back, I think you're going to see a big progression from him. But you're right, a key race to go back to and watch.
Yep, and what I've brought up here for you is from Brisnet, a little snapshot of what they think the pace might be. You talked about Determinedly probably not wanting to be a horse on the front, but you got 3 horses right there designated with an 8. You got 3 more horses designated with a 6. And what I always like to look at is the Brisnet Prime Power. I think it does a really good job of giving you a really quick sense of, okay, what's the makeup of this race as far as who's your best horse and maybe who's your worst horse. So obviously Private Creed has a 141, which we'll get to Private Creed because that's interesting based on where he's coming from. But 141 all the way down to 111 is a gigantic spread. But 141 to 131, and you look and you see you've got 9-10 horses right in there. This is going to set up for a really great betting race.
Yeah, absolutely. A great betting race because I think you'll be able to make legitimate arguments for the 8th or 9th horse on this list. I think you could absolutely make a case for Curly Jack or Tappett's Conquest. You see a little bit lower there. And you have a horse like Krupi, who's a maiden still, but has run up against excellent company and has finished just outside of the winner's circle, but has never missed the board actually in all career races. So that's a horse that is intriguing that you're probably going to get at a little bit of a price. Sun Thunder, I know, is a horse that you were kind of high on. And I think that's a horse that, again, going back and looking at the trips that they got, was in the slop in that Southwest. So how does this horse respond under better conditions, maybe, and maybe be able to give a little bit of a better effort? But Private Creed being up there and trying dirt for the first time, that's an interesting dynamic, obviously, to see him at the top of the Prime Power rankings.
Yeah, and so Private Creed has only raced on the turf 6 times. 2 back was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile turf. So certainly coming back from that strong race, I think that probably has a pretty significant impact on the Prime Power number because you're getting the class number out of that and ran a 98 Brisnet speed figure out of that. So that's certainly playing into that. But moving to the dirt with that way outside post, for me, I probably will pass.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to ask for any horse to take to the surface for the first time. Although there's decent enough pedigree to suggest that he will be able to take to dirt, but I think you're right. That far outside post and the fact that he's not a speed horse, Victory Formation. If you take a look, that 13 post, if you can make an argument for how he's going to get to the winner's circle, very similar to how Litigate perhaps won today at the Sam F. Davis from that far outside post, going early, saving ground, getting over to the inside. Victory Formation should be able to do that because there's not a ton of speed immediately to his inside. So you should be able to cross and clear a lot of these horses to get a pretty good trip. But it's going to certainly ask a lot of Flavien Prat early on for him to be able to do that.
One reason I've done well in the prep races so far is because the angle that I love is let's see horses that have had success at longer distances. This field, you've got numbers 2 through 14 who have all run at least a mile. The only one that hasn't is number 1, Quiet as Midnight, who for me, based on the speed figures, is not even in the same stadium, not even in the same state as the rest of these horses. So, down on the rail with some connections that I'm not 100% familiar with. I think we're good passing off on Quiet as Midnight. But what my point is that angle for me now becomes harder, but it maybe not as hard because now I have the ability to see what the horses have done over a mile, and you're starting to get the sense of who's maybe going to have the Derby distance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also where you want to take a look at going back to those replays and watching how do these horses run at a mile and a 16th? Are they losing ground at the end? Are they striding out? Do they look weak? Are they switching their leads effectively? Those are things that you have to pay attention for because now, as you mentioned in the very beginning, the competition level is getting ratcheted up. So we can't get away with some of the things perhaps horses have gotten away with just based off sheer natural talent. The other thing I tend to look for is horses with increasing speed figures or who are trending up. So one of the things that bothers me about Determinedly is that this is a horse that kind of runs the same figure over and over again when you're looking at like a Beyer speed figure. Doesn't really see a lot of progression. You kind of know what you're getting. Curly Jack, a little bit the same. Coming off the layoff, you might see a bit of a bounce. You never know. But there are certain horses where I like to see that ascension of this horse is still has yet to run its best race. And those are things I like to see out of horses in this particular spot.
Yeah, and me too. And the 2 horses that I'm looking at for that is, well, we know that Tappett's Conquest is entering Barber Road territory for me, but Two Phils was a horse that I really haven't been interested in, but you know what? His speed figures have slowly been increasing, and I'll give you a little tidbit that I like to look for. When I'm looking at Brisnet speed figures, I love to see coupled lifetime bests, and we just saw that today out at Golden Gate, who
Mm-hmm.
the name is escaping me,
Chase the
Captain the
Chaos. Yeah,
Chaos,
yeah, yeah.
who came into that race with lifetime best 88s in the last 2 races. To me, it's either the horse is then he's shown his best and is going to regress a little, or the 2 back to back means that there's something else coming. And I
Mm-hmm.
see that with 2 fills. He's got 2 93s in his last 2 races in grade 3 company, the
Mm-hmm.
Lecomte and the Street Sense, only lost by 2.5 lengths to Instant Coffee, who we is a name that is certainly out there right now. So a horse that I never thought that I'd be saying I'd be interested in here, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, or
Yeah.
maybe a month ago, is 2 fills, and he's one that's on my radar.
I think he's absolutely on my radar too. He just seems like a really consistent horse. I remember making a comment to El Hombre when we were doing a Kentucky Derby top 25 countdown that he just feels like a horse who's going to be in the starting gate at the Kentucky Derby because he just doesn't run bad races, it feels like, and he's going to rack up a lot of points throughout the Derby trail. And I also love the fact that he ran that figure you mentioned last time out. That was off of a layoff too. So you would expect second time back from a layoff, going to see a little bit more progression there. He's been working out very nicely for Larry Rivelli. So I'm excited to see what he has to bring here. And you're right. He's a horse that was maybe a little just kind of an afterthought at one point. And now every time I kind of take a look at his PPs, I get a little bit more fond of him. And so he's moving up my power rankings a little bit.
And this is a race. I mean, first and second place are most likely going to make the gate, you would think. I mean, 50 to the winner, that's going to get you in.
Yep.
20 points is going to, you might need another third or fourth somewhere to try and get into that company. But you can almost watch this race, and I can guarantee you, aside from, the typical Derby trail stuff of injuries and all that good stuff, you could say that, the winner of this race will make the gate. Another thing I'd like to point out, and me and Matt are working behind the scenes on a barn tour like Matt did for the Breeders' Cup. And not only because you have 14 horses, you have a nice variety of barns, but we're getting 3 Cox and 3 Asmussen. So this is also going to give us a little insight on, how their barn is shaping up. And I think one thing that's really intriguing for me is, remember, Brad Cox scratched Tapit's Conquest out of the Lecomte to run in that previous undercard race, right? Well, now he's throwing him in, I think, unless there's an undercard race to move him to. But I think what he saw in that race has given him confidence to move him in here. And you've got 2 of his, arguably the best with Victory Formation is definitely one of his best. Yeah. And now you're going to see what Tapit's Conquest has.
Yeah, and Angel of Empire ran a really big race. The last time out was kind of a long shot, but ended up finishing second. And listen, I always got a rep from my PA breds, being a native of Pennsylvania myself. So, and gets Louis Saez on the mount. So you get a really great jockey there. And this is going to be an interesting race with the big field size. I think a lot is going to come down to which of these jockeys can get these horses the right trip, the right setup, the right pace scenario to really get them home. So one of the things I also look for is horses that are versatile, that if plan A doesn't work out, that plan B is still in the bag and that they can still maybe figure out a way to win this race. But horses that are just kind of one note, where it's I need the lead and nothing else, or I'm a dead closer and nothing else, I get a little bit more worried about those types of horses.
And you can go back to 2 Phils, who's one on the front and also one off as well. So we'll finish up here with a little capping the card theme of who's your on top. And I know we don't have morning lines, but who maybe is a value play for you?
Yeah, I think looking at this one, I'm gonna maybe steal a little bit of your thunder, and I'm gonna take Tapit's Conquest up top. I think this is a horse that is absolutely ascending, my type of horse in terms of progressive, in the terms of the speed figures. And then I will actually take a little bit of a flyer on Krupe underneath. I think this is a horse that I know has not broken his maiden yet, but has run up against excellent horses such as Instant Coffee and others in maiden races, and has always shown the ability to hold his own. So I'm going to take a shot there with Krupe coming from the 12 hole.
Yeah, Tapit's Conquest for me, and that only makes me feel better about a horse I've been on. He's at least been on my list since the beginning. Yeah. I will definitely take a long look at 2 Phils, and my value play will be number 2, Single Ruler, who now has 3 races at 1 1/16 and has consistently shown that improvement of the speed figures. I know it took him 5 races to break his maiden, but lost to Banishing, Phineas Fogg, and Tappet formation.
Yep.
So that's, it's not as good as the quality as you just rattled off for Krupi, but it's not, it's
No,
not
those are good
terrible.
horses. Those are good horses. Yeah, absolutely.
So that is my value play. What do we got next week on capping the card?
Well, we are going to be capping all, I believe, 13 races, if I'm not mistaken, on the Fairgrounds card. Going to be joined by a special guest who works at the Fairgrounds, so get a little inside information there. And we're going to try to run through all 13 and do it in about 45 minutes, give you our top pick, top value play for all the races.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. Stay tuned right here on Trust the Profits YouTube page as we continue to give you unprecedented coverage as we lead up to the 2023 Kentucky Derby.